My next question is from Anand. Anand has a very complex question. It is about rise of anti-Muslim nationalisms both in India and Europe. And he's also talking about the concept of the Muslim world, and then he's talking about the Pasmanda Muslims in India. So the first question, I think that there is a reactionary quality to European right-wing resurgence, but because of the growth of Muslim population in Europe and the Al-Qaeda related and ISIS related acts of terrorism that have taken place in many parts of Europe. But nevertheless, Europe is also getting very xenophobic, and it is also becoming increasingly aware of the growing Muslim population. And so there are some right-wing groups emerging to essentially reduce the strengthening of Islamic identity in Europe. So clearly there is a reactionary quality, but the rise of Hindu nationalism is not necessarily in opposition to this phenomena of Muslim resurgence in Iran and other places, because Hindu nationalism goes back to the 1920s with the emergence of RSS and Savarkar, etc. So this is pre-independence. It was an alternative nationalist movement. Gandhi, Nehru, and others basically dominated the Hindu side of Indian nationalism, while Maulana Azad and then later Jinnah dominated the Muslim political sphere in those days. So yes, Hindu nationalism was there, but it was not that big a player as it became after the 1980s, especially after Advani's Rath Yatra and using Babri Masjid as the focal point. So you could argue that Hindu nationalism emerged as the Babri Masjid issue became more and more salient in Indian politics. As for the concept of the Muslim world, there are books out there which question this idea. It's an imaginary concept. There is no such thing as the Muslim world out there. I live in Delaware. I'm a Muslim. I was born in India. So am I part of the Muslim world or not? So it's an imaginary concept which does not have fixed territorial boundaries. There are more Muslims in Michigan than perhaps in some of the smaller countries like Qatar. Muslims are nearly in every part of the world. So there is this imaginary concept of the Ummah where there's some kind of cultural and political solidarity, but you do not see that on main issues. You don't see the whole Muslim world uniting to support the Palestinians or the Uyghurs. So in effect, you could argue that while in poetry, etc., you might come across the idea of Muslim world and some political writings, but in effect, there is no such place called the Muslim world, which is very serious. So, for example, now Russian clergy people talk about the Russian world, while during this war in Ukraine, basically talking about Russia and Russian-speaking diaspora of Russia. So yes, there are Muslim majority countries, and then there are Muslims who live as minorities in many parts of the world. And maybe during Ramadan and during the Hajj season, there is joint worship taking place globally. So in that context, you could say that there is a cultural and maybe a spiritual Muslim world, but from a political perspective, there is no such thing. How do you think the Muslim caste system will be exploited by the BJP in the upcoming general elections? The BJP is clearly seeking to create a division between the so-called Pasmanda Muslims, and they call them now the elite Muslims. I don't know what the word is. I didn't even know which side I belonged to until this discussion started. But nevertheless, there are some voices in the so-called Pasmanda groups who are very vocal about how they have been ill-treated and discriminated, especially in the marriage market, really. So it is quite possible that some of them might vote for BJP if they are given reservations. So if the BJP somehow manages to provide reservations in jobs, in academic institutions for the lower caste Muslims, as they do for lower caste Hindus, then clearly they will be able to create a BJP vote bank within the Muslim community in India. No doubt about that. So thank you very much to all of you for sending these wonderful questions. Please send me more questions to askprofkhan@gmail.com. It's a special account only for questions. And do please subscribe to Khanversations and ring the bell icon and share this video with your friends.